Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. Please excuse this video if it shakes a little bit. I don't have any furniture in my new house, so this computer is stacked on top of two storage totes, keeping it classy. Today we're going to dive into Chapter 7 of Night. I'll be pausing this occasionally to touch on some of those themes and topics we're looking for, as well as any other major points in the story that might require some additional attention. So thank you for joining me. Let's go ahead and get started. Chapter 7. Pressed tightly against one another in an effort to resist the cold, our heads empty and heavy, our brains a whirlwind of decaying memories, our minds numb with indifference. Here or elsewhere, what did it matter? Die today or tomorrow or later? The night was growing longer, never ending. When at last a grayish light appeared on the horizon, it revealed a tangle of human shapes, heads sunk deeply between the shoulders, crouching, piled one on top of the other, like a cemetery covered with snow. In the early dawn light I tried to distinguish between the living and those who were no more, but there was barely a difference. My gaze remained fixed on someone who, eyes wide open, stared into space. His colorless face was covered with a layer of frost and snow. My father had huddled near me, draped in his blanket, shoulders laden with snow. And what if he were dead as well? I called out to him. No response. I would have screamed if I could have. He was not moving. Suddenly the evidence overwhelmed me. There was no longer any reason to live, any reason to fight. And what made him feel that way is the question. His father, he's looking at his father, doesn't seem to be responsive and moving, and that's made Ellie give up hope. So his father has been a source of inspiration to him throughout this story and helped him stay motivated when others give up. The train stopped in an empty field. The abrupt halt had wakened a few sleepers. They stood looking around startled. Outside, the SS walked by, shouting, "Throw out all the dead! Outside! All the corpses!" The living were glad. They would have much more room. Volunteers began the task. They touched those who had remained on the ground. "Here's one, take him!" The volunteers undressed him and eagerly shared his garments. Then two grave diggers grabbed him by the head and feet and threw him from the wagon like a sack of flour. There was shouting all around. "Come on, here's another. My neighbor, he's not moving." I woke from my apathy only when two men approached my father. I threw myself on his body. He was cold. I slapped him. I rubbed his hands, crying, "Father, Father, wake up! They're going to throw you outside!" His body remained inert. The two grave diggers had grabbed me by the neck. "Leave him alone. Can't you see that he's dead?" "No," I yelled. "He's not dead. Not yet." And I started to hit him harder and harder. At last my father half opened his eyes. They were glassy. He was breathing faintly. "You see?" I cried. The two men went away. 20 corpses were thrown from our wagon. Then the train resumed its journey, leaving in its wake in a snowy field in Poland hundreds of dead and naked orphans without a tomb. So, let's talk about loss of humanity here. Normally, when people die, we treat them with respect. We memorialize them, we mourn them, and we inter their bodies in some way to give them a final resting place. And these people weren't really put to rest necessarily. He describes them being tossed as bags of flour. So we can definitely see the loss of humanity here in the treatment of the dead. We received no food. We lived on snow. It took the place of bread. The days resembled the nights, and the nights left in our souls the dregs of their darkness. The train rolled slowly, often halted for a few hours and continued. It never stopped snowing. We remained lying on the floor for days and nights, one on top of the other, never uttering a word. We were nothing but frozen bodies. Our eyes were closed. We merely waited for the next stop to unload our dead. There followed days and nights of traveling. Occasionally we would pass through German towns. Usually very early in the morning, German laborers were going to work. They would stop and look at us without surprise. One day, when we come to a stop, a worker took a piece of bread out of his bag and threw it into a wagon. There was a stampede. Dozens of starving men fought desperately over a few crumbs. The worker watched the spectacle with great interest. Years later, I witnessed a similar spectacle in Aden. Our ship's passengers amused themselves by throwing coins to the natives who dove to retrieve them. An elegant Parisian lady took great pleasure in this game. When I noticed two children desperately fighting in the water, one trying to strangle the other, I implored the lady, "Please, don't throw any more coins." "Why not?" she said. "I like to give to charity." In the wagon where the bread had landed, a battle ensued. Men were hurling themselves against each other, trampling, tearing at, and mauling each other. Beasts of prey unleashed, animal hate in their eyes. An extraordinary vitality possessed them, sharpening their teeth and nails. A crowd of workmen and curious passers-by had formed all along the train. They'd undoubtedly never seen a train with this kind of cargo. Soon pieces of bread were falling into the wagon from all sides, and the spectators observed these emaciated creatures ready to kill for a crust of bread. A piece fell into our wagon. I decided not to move. Anyway, I knew I would not be strong enough to fight off dozens of violent men. I saw not far from me an old man dragging himself on all fours. He'd just detached himself from the struggling mob. He was holding one hand to his heart. At first I thought he'd received a blow to his chest. Then I understood. He was hiding a piece of bread under his shirt. With lightning speed, he pulled it out and put it to his mouth. His eyes lit up. A smile, like a grimace, illuminated his ashen face, and was immediately extinguished. A shadow had lain down beside him, and this shadow threw itself over him. Stunned by the blows, the old man was crying, "Mare, my little mare, don't you recognize me? You're killing your father. I have bread for you too. For you too." He collapsed, but his fist was still clutching a small crust. He wanted to raise it to his mouth, but the other threw himself on him. The old man mumbled something, groaned, and died. Nobody cared. His son searched him, took the crust of bread, and began to devour it. He didn't get far. 2 men had been watching him. They jumped him. Others joined in. When they withdrew, there were 2 dead bodies next to me, the father and the son. I was 16. Let's talk about this for a moment. There's a break in the organizational structure of the text. Eli had been talking about his experiences during the Holocaust, and then he goes on to talking about when he was on a boat, seeing this woman throwing coins out to the children down below, and he compares the two. On the surface, we've talked about this before when we read Scarlet Ibis long ago. One brother taught his other to walk, and that would seem like a kind and wonderful thing to do, training him and helping him regain his strength and giving him that mobility. But his motivation was not to help his brother, it was to ease his own embarrassment. And let's think about the motivation here. What is the motivation of the woman from Paris throwing the coins down to the children, and what is the motivation of the German workers throwing the bread down to the Holocaust prisoners in those trains? And if we think about the motivation, it seems to be the spectacle. They are watching people struggle and fight over something that is so minimal to the German workers and to the Parisian lady, they can afford to throw it over. It means very little to them, but it means so much to the people receiving it, so much that they're willing to fight for it because they are struggling. That little scrap of bread could mean the difference between life and death for someone. So even though the act on the surface is kind, how kind is it really? When we're helping people, what is our motivation? Are we giving them something and ensuring that it will make their life better? Or in this case, did throwing those coins and throwing that bread make their lives worse? Is it rooted in this sense of, I want to help someone and make things better for them? Or is it rooted in the sense of getting the entertainment value out of it? In this case, it seems to be the entertainment value. So this shows us loss of humanity on both sides. We have the father and son in that little anecdote, struggling over one piece of bread, physically fighting each other. And that would not happen in normal circumstances. Father and son would not treat each other that way. And then we have those 2 young boys, again, fighting over the coins that the woman from Paris is throwing over the side of the ship, fighting and struggling. So they've lost some humanity, the fact that they struggle with each other, they physically fight with one another. But we also see that the people who are throwing these items to them have lost some humanity because they see this as entertainment rather than what it is. It's a struggle between life and death. All right, let's continue from there. Oh, I moved back too far, excuse me. In our wagon, there was a friend of my father's, Mere Katz. He'd worked as a gardener in Buna, and from time to time had brought us some green vegetables. Less undernourished than the rest of us, detention had been easier on him. Because he was stronger than most of us, he'd been put in charge of our wagon. On the 3rd night of our journey, I woke up with a start when I felt 2 hands on my throat trying to strangle me. I barely had time to call out, "Father!" Just that one word. I was suffocating, but my father had awakened and grabbed my aggressor. Too weak to overwhelm him, he thought of calling Mere Katz. Come quickly! Someone is strangling my son!" In a few moments, I was freed. I never did find out why this stranger had wanted to strangle me. But days later, Mere Katz told my father, "Shlomo, I am getting weak. My strength is gone. I won't make it. Don't give in, my father tried to encourage him. You must resist. Don't lose faith in yourself. But Meerkat Katz only groaned in response. I can't go on, Shlomo. I can't help it. I can't go on. My father took his arm, and Meerkat Katz, the strong one, the sturdiest of us all, began to cry. His son had been taken from him during the first election, but only now was he crying for him. Only now did he fall apart. He could not go on. He had reached the end. So we're seeing a comparison here between physical strength and emotional strength. Meerkat Katz is obviously the most physically capable person on the train. That's why he was put in charge. But the emotional strength is failing him. We again see how Ellie and his father are, in relation to the others around them, somewhat fortunate because they got to stay with one another while other people were separated, and it's been detrimental to them. On the last day of our journey, a terrible wind began to blow, and the snow kept falling. We sensed that the end was near, the real end. We could not hold out long in this glacial wind, this storm. Somebody got up and yelled, We must not remain sitting. We shall freeze to death. Let's get up and move. We all got up. We all pulled our soaked blankets tighter around our shoulders, and we tried to take a few steps, to shuffle back and forth in place. Suddenly a cry rose in the wagon, a cry of a wounded animal. Someone had just died. Others close to death imitated his cry, and their cries seemed to come from beyond the grave. Soon everybody was crying, groaning, moaning. Cries of distress hurtled into the wind and the snow. The lament spread from wagon to wagon. It was contagious. And now hundreds of cries rose at once, the death rattle of an entire convoy with the end approaching. All boundaries had been crossed. Nobody had any strength left, and the night seemed endless. Meerkat Katz was moaning, Why don't they just shoot us now? That same night we reached our destination. It was late. The guards came to unload us. The dead were left in their wagons. Only those who could stand could leave. Meerkat Katz remained on the train. The last day had been the most lethal. We'd been 100 or so in this wagon. 12 of us left it. Among them, my father and myself. We had arrived in Buchenwald. So that is the end of chapter 7, I believe we just read. Chapter 7. And Ellie and his father being 12 of 100 that boarded that train has to make us wonder, how did they survive when others did not? Ellie's father, without Ellie, would have been thrown over the side of the train when those grave diggers came to take out the dead. So we have to credit their survival, at least to some extent, to each other. Having somebody to depend on, having somebody to live for, has made this more survivable. Can't say easier. This is certainly not easy for anybody, but it's increased their odds for survival in this crazy circumstance. All right, guys, thank you for checking into Chapter 7. If you have any question about the assignments or anything else this week, please let me know. Please be advised that e-learning hours are 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. I am passing out lunches a few days of the week, so I might not get back to you right away, but I will try to as soon as possible. But the best times to get to me are Tuesday, Wednesday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Please take a look at PowerSchool. If you have finished something and hasn't been updated yet, let me know, and we will get that changed for you. If there's something and you don't know what it is that's in PowerSchool and you're not sure where it is in Canvas, contact me and let me know. You can use that phone number to call or text, and you can also use my email to get in contact with me as well. But please try to use those e-learning days. Somebody called me yesterday, and it was my bridal shower, so I couldn't answer. So just please be cognizant of the fact that we do have that time specifically for asking questions. Take advantage of that. If you have questions at another time, send them anyway, let me know, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. Take care of yourselves. Be safe.